My name's Mick.
And my name's Sophie.
And we've been designing and implementing the Anstead Permaculture gardens for the last 3 years. I first got into gardening when I was growing up with this garden bed, which was originally placed this way. Over the years, I've rotated around and added 2 garden beds next to it. We started off with a lot of annuals, your normal European veg, but over the years we've developed into more perennial system, with Soph and I being away often and Mum being the only one here to look after the garden. In this bed we got a pigeon pea that gets cut back to allow more sun in through the winter. Comfrey growing underneath it that loves the shade. Sambung, an Asian green that can be used like lettuce or spinach. Grows really well, especially through the hotter time of the year. Licorice, basil, mint, marigolds, tomatoes. We've got Russian comfrey. The comfreys, we mainly use them. Soph makes a balm out of them to heal bones and bruises and sore muscles. Wasabi parsley, Mum's favourite. It's a Brassica family with a strong wasabi flavour. Over in this garden there's purple amaranth, which can be used as a green, another one that loves the warmer climate. And cranberry hibiscus, related to the rosella, has a lemony taste and all parts can be eaten.
In this old bathtub we have some ladybird, cosmos and nasturtiums.
This bed here was actually the first garden bed at home. I remember as a kid there was a big rosemary bush I used to play in. Now there's lavender, lemongrass, nasturtium, orchids, aloe vera, purple sweet potato, and some rosemary. After living at Malidora permaculture property down in central Victoria, I moved up here in 2019 and decided to start transforming this barren hill of dead grass and weeds into a small food forest. I started off with 10 fruit trees on this hill, and over the years we've added more trees, short-lived species, ground covers and herbs. Like a lot of the trees on this hill, they were designed to be in specific places. The lemon here, for instance, is the closest to the house, so that first thing in the morning you can come out and fertilize it with your weed. Many of the fruit trees have pigeon peas growing next to them. The idea of that is that they fix the nitrogen, and through the summertime they protect the tree with shade, but also in wintertime we trim them back and drop it to release nitrogen into the soil and also allow sun to come in to the plant through winter. The Grumachama is in the Myrtaceae family, so it's quite closely related to guavas and particularly cherry guavas. The difference is I've observed up further in Queensland that the Grumachama doesn't get as affected by fruit fly as the cherry guava does.
This is probably one of the most popular trees in the world. It's a coffee bush and there's some ripe berries forming at the moment. It's an understory tree, likes the shade. Delicious. This is a mandarin tree and it was one of the original trees on the hill. This is a grafted macadamia. Now over to Mick.
And this is an air-laid lychee.
This is a moringa. The leaves are edible and it's really nutritious. All over the hill here we have a ground cover called a lab, and it's a nitrogen fixing in the Fabaceae family. It keeps moisture in the ground, and we chop and drop it so that the soil is provided with nitrogen.
The sapodilla is an interesting fruit. You generally eat it by cooking it. I've never actually tasted it, but my theory is that if you have to cook it to eat it, it'll be less prone to animal attack. The candlestick is a senna species and is another nitrogen fixing species that we have in the food forest. the yellow sapote, which is unrelated to the black sapote. The black sapote, or chocolate pudding fruit, is actually a type of persimmon, and you eat it after you pick it. You let it sit on the bench for a few days to soften.
This is another tree that was already established on the hill. It's a lime and it just never stops giving.
This grafted avocado is in the Lauraceae family, and I was surprised to find out that it's actually quite palatable to deer. So we've got mesh protection around it, and also allowed the vegetation to grow up around it to give it an added layer of protection. The Turkish brown fig, I prefer it over black Genoa, but it doesn't seem to be growing as well in the subtropical climate.
This is the peanut butter tree, and the small fruits taste just like peanut butter or peanut paste.
The miracle fruit is a tropical understory shrub. The small fruits block your sour receptors and make anything taste sweet. This mulberry tree was grown from a cutting and is another favourite of the wild deer in the area.
This is an elderberry. The flowers and the berries are used to make cordials, syrups and tea.
And the lupin growing with it is another nitrogen fixing species that adds diversity in the forest.
One of my all-time favourites, the mango tree.
After the success of the mandarin and lime that was existing on the hill, I planted an orange tree, which hasn't done as well as I would have thought it would have. That's another benefit to this wide diversity, is that you can have some failures alongside your successes. Under this fruit fly net is a Hawaiian guava. The fruit is larger, the seeds are smaller, and the skin is less bitter. The black Genoa fig is more vigorous, but the leaves are succumbing to a fungal attack during the humidity of summer.
This is a self-pollinating custard apple.
The Malabar chestnut has nuts that taste just like chestnut, and the young leaves are also edible too. Now we'll head down the paddock to the other gardens. This garden here, Sophie and I started at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. It was a way to increase our resilience and food sovereignty by growing most of our own vegetables.
When we started this garden, we were really focusing on the annuals, but we've slowly transitioned to the perennials like the cassava. We've got ginger, red galangal, and arrowroot. We've got some pawpaws here, and these are bisexual pawpaws to make sure that we get fruit. The feijoa here is one of my absolute favourites, and it's the only tree that we have two of.
To protect the garden from the dry westerly winds, we've planted a hedge of lily pillies. And in the meantime, as they're growing, we have tough species like arrowroot and pigeon pea on the western side of the garden, and a passion fruit vine growing on the western side to provide that wind shelter in the short term. We named this garden the Rufus Garden in memory of our family dog Rufus, who was buried below this lemon myrtle in 2020. In order to expand on our food forest, we moved further down the paddock and started another garden down here. The custard apple was existing, but everything else built around it has happened in the last couple of years. The basic design of this food forest was long-lived perennial food-bearing trees. In between each space was nitrogen-fixing or short-lived species such as pawpaws. Some of what we're growing are mulberries, blood orange, kumquat, Atherton raspberry, macadamia, sandpaper fig, coffee, orange berry, Brazilian guava, arrowroot, Jamaican arrowroot, black sapote, gramachama, mangosteen, peanut butter tree, and Atherton almond. In the other section of the food forest, I've got a dripper system for irrigation, but on this southeast facing slope I'm experimenting with very hardy species which could withstand the dry conditions of winter without irrigation. This yellow guava was grown from seed collected from local bushland, so I know that it's adapted to this climate. Another introduced fruit species, the Suriname or Brazilian cherry, seeds were collected from nearby roadside. And this tamarind was grown from seed collected from a roadside tree that was planted as a street tree. So I know that it's capable of tough conditions. The gumby is a medicinal native plant that I've collected seeds from in central Queensland as well as western New South Wales. Another tough hardy species that I know is capable of surviving and thriving without irrigation.
Down in this back section of the property is what we call carob country.
We grew 3 carobs from seed and planted them down the back here. They're the long-lived species that will provide food long into the future. It's a little bit of an experiment here in the subtropics. We're unsure whether they'll fruit well with climate change. Until the day that the carob's a huge majestic tree, we've got Surinames planted in between that'll provide food in the short term. Much like the pigeon peas and candlesticks, this drooping she oak also fixes nitrogen in the soil. With a lot more space down here, we've been able to add in diversity with natives that produce habitat for birds and bees, such as the Leptospermum, Westringia and Callistemon. Away from the main areas, we also have food-bearing trees scattered throughout the property for diversity, such as this moringa growing in the middle of the property. This dooja or round lime is a native citrus that grows locally in this area and is self-sown here. Thanks for visiting us here at the Anstead Permaculture Gardens. It's been a real joy to create and continue working in this space.
Can't wait to show you what happens over the next